Hello! I am here to tell you everything about Blender. And by everything, I mean some of it. And by some of it, I mean just a small portion of it. And by a small portion of it, I mean, like, just the smallest, tiniest. Blender is like an endless void of universe. There's so much that you can do on Blender. It's very intimidating. And I highly recommend you look at other tutorials on the internet. That's one of the beautiful things about Blender, is the fact that it's free, and because it's free, there's a lot of people to help you on it. But hopefully this is just a good way to sort of get started and dip your toes in the Blender pool. So when you open Blender, you want to start with a general file, and Blender will just give you this cube. Isn't that so nice? It gives you a cube, and you didn't even have to do anything for it. Now there are a few things that you have to consider. There's this little navigation circle that helps you sort of navigate around, and there's all these fancy tools. You can zoom in, you can kind of use the hand to move around, but as you can see when you hover... Oh, it doesn't tell you. Well, when you use a mouse, you can sort of use the middle mouse button, and when you click shift, the middle mouse button will help you move around like so. If you click control, it sort of lets you zoom in and out. And if you just kind of use the middle mouse in general, you can kind of go around here. Now, if you're like me and you have the Apple Magic Mouse button, which I believe is the most amount of money you can spend on the least amount of mouse, you can just kind of drag your finger around like so. Anyways, to get started, we're going to want to go to where it says Object Mode and just click on Edit Mode. And now you will see that you've got this cube, and it's got all these little points over here. Now, I don't want to explain everything about how it works, but essentially you're gonna have to deal with vertices or edges, or you got faces. And basically, there are there are 4 different viewing modes. They're kind of right up here in the top right corner. There's wireframe, which lets you see through the object. There's viewport shading, which lets you just kind of see the shapes as a gray entity. There's material mode that lets you actually see the material. And then there's render mode to show you what the final render might look like. We're going to go to wireframe, and we're just going to flip between wireframe and viewport shading for now, just because it's easier on the computer and my eyes. So there are a few ways that you can mess around with this cube. You can either move it around like so with this transform tool, like you can kind of rotate it like so, and you can scale it around depending on which way you sort of drag it. Another way to do this is S for scale, R for rotate, and G for, I don't know, grab. And then there's also the all-in-one set, where you can sort of see all of these controls at once. I usually operate in this all the time, just so that I don't have to switch between modes to change an object. I can just kind of click and pull and drag on whatever I need. Anyways, now that that's out of the way, let's get to the fun stuff. You've got extrude. Extrude is exactly what it sounds like. It lets you extrude from the object. So if I want to create new stuff from this face, I can simply extrude like so. And now I've got all of these wonderful little faces to use. Look at that. Next we have inset. Inset sort of lets you take a face and do whatever, however you would describe this. And you might be like, why would I want to do that? But if you want to, I don't know, make a window by clicking X for delete, and then clicking faces, well, now you got this nice little opening to the box. Or say you want to, I don't know, extrude it more, then you have this little smaller square sticking out of this bigger square. And then we have bevel, which is sort of like if you backwards extruded and did an inset at the same time. And if you want to know what I mean by that, it's kind of like this. And so, in case you don't already see it yet, these 3 tools can take you so far. You can use a cube and pretty much use these tools to make, like, anything? Oh, you want a lamp? What if I just... Boom, you got yourself this ravishing IKEA lamp. You want a water bottle? Boom, you got yourself a water bottle. I realized that I kind of just made like the same shape for both of them, but you can see what I mean. You can do a lot with this. Oh, and you might be like, okay, what if I want to make something that's like not just a fancy cube? When you select this cube and you click subdivide, subdivide lets you to sort of cut up the shape into smaller bits. Another way to subdivide is through the modifiers, and modifiers can get really scary and just a lot of options, but when you click on this little wrench in the corner, you can add a modifier called subdivision, and you can choose between Catmull Clark, whoever that may be, or simple. Simple sort of lets you do what you can do in edit mode, but Catmull Clark lets you actually be able to like really just squish. You can make it real squishy. You can also use the power of the loop cut, which is kind of like subdividing but more customizable. You can not only just select the middle of it, but you can also click and drag to cut the shape up into specific parts. Another way to do this is just clicking Command R and then clicking once to determine where you want to place the cut, and then twice to secure the slice. And that's like kind of all you need. Your imagination runs from there with the power of extruding, insetting, beveling, subdividing, and loop cutting. I believe, truly, that you can pretty much make anything. Another bonus tip is that you can either... It's hard to see with a cube, but if you add a different object, which is Shift-A, you can add something like a sphere. And if you don't want it to look all bumply and rumply like some sort of weird golf ball, you can right-click on it and click Shade Smooth. And you'll notice that there's also an option called Auto Smooth, and Auto Smooth is basically Blender's way of deciding whether something should be shaded flat or shaded smooth. So if you want something to have parts of it that are shaded flat and parts of it that are shaded smooth, auto smoothing is a good choice for you. And whenever you run into issues with that, you can just select a certain part of the object, right click, and choose shade flat or shade smooth. That way when you go back to it, you can sort of customize what part of the object is shaded flat and what part is shaded smooth. Pretty neat. Next we can talk about materials. So I've got this funky little fish fella over here, and I want to make it all colorful and fancy. That's when materials come in. If you go to this little beach ball looking thing, you can click new, and it'll give it a material. And you might be like, I don't see the difference. And that's when it comes back to the material mode. You see that little beach ball thing that's now over here? If you click on that, you can actually see the materials. And you might be like, Matthew, it still doesn't look that much different. And you know what? That's because the material right now is white. But if you click on here, you can sort of change it to be a red fish, or a blue fish, or one fish, or two fish. But what if you're like, oh, I have this one object that I'd like two colors on? That's a simple, there is a simple solution for that. If you click add here, you can actually create another material. And you can sort of change it to be pink, perhaps. And you might be like, oh, it didn't turn pink. I'm getting there! Be patient. If you go to edit mode, you can select the parts that you want to change the color of. Simply click on the material you want it to change it to and click assign. And all of a sudden, you'll have this lovely new rainbow fish. It's beautiful. And that is as far as I'm probably going to take you in this video. As I said, there's probably a lot more you want to learn on Blender, and that's just not enough to cover in a however long this video turns out to be. I recommend checking out Blender Guru's Notorious Donut video, or some of the other videos that I will probably link in the description. Either way, I hope that this was a good way to sort of just get you started with Blender and make Blender feel like not as scary of an entity. I personally love using Blender. It's what I use for most of the crazy, silly little YouTube videos I make. Stuff like the stupid songs that I write and like planet insecurities and star vlogs. And a future upcoming project, wink. Blender is a super powerful software that you can do a lot of stuff with. And I highly recommend going down the rabbit hole that is all of the things you can do on Blender and Blender tutorials, like what I do sometimes. Anyways, that's all. Happy Blendering. I need to stop talking.